This is Rob Gray from ASU and PerceptionAction.com. Today on the Perception and Action podcast, my interview with Ed Cullen, Phil Kearney, and Ollie Logan, founders of Movement and Skill Acquisition Ireland. Hi everyone, welcome to the Perception and Action podcast, where I discuss how psychological research can be applied to improving performance, accelerating skill acquisition, and designing technologies. Movement and Skill Acquisition Ireland is an organization recently formed by Ed Cullen from the Cork Institute of Technology, Phil Kearney from the University of Limerick, and Ollie Logan from British Swimming. On April 6th and 7th of this year, they'll be hosting their first conference event, titled Constraints-Based Coaching and Ecological Dynamics to Enhance Sports Performance. In the interview, we discuss the goals of their organization and what attendees can expect from their conference. Beyond that, we also talk about ways in which we can better facilitate the use of constraints-based coaching and how research and practice can better support each other. Hope you enjoy!
Not 10 years ago, I was a child. I was a good boy and you let me go. Now I'm on a talk show. All
right, today my guests are Ed Cullen, Phil Kearney, and Ollie Logan from Movement and Skill Acquisition Ireland. Thanks for taking some time to chat with me, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
To kick things off, I thought we'd just go around the virtual table here and give you each a chance to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about your background. So,
well, let's go alphabetically.
Okay.
I'll go first with my C for Colin.
Okay.
Just keep it brief. Ed Cullen, background in skill acquisition through a PhD with Mark Williams, and I suppose where I'm at now is just a lecturer in CIT and a coach consultant across multiple sports with a particular interest over the last couple of years in golf to determine a space for kind of constraints-based coaching and effective practice environments. That's it, really. Keep it brief.
Perfect.
Again, like Ed, originally got involved in skill acquisition. Did my PhD in Limerick, looking at applying skill acquisition within children's fundamental movement skills. Then went over to England for 8 years, working at the University of Chichester. Very lucky to get in an institution where skill acquisition was really important. And I've just recently arrived back in Ireland, teamed up with Ed and Ollie, and they are leading me astray, which is good. Research focusing on athletics mostly, so developing youth athletics. So athletics is the sport of my preference sport-wise, and really interested in applying my research to that domain.
Great. And Ollie?
Myself, I've a biomechanics background. I started with the English Institute of Sport in 2006. And that's really where I kind of got involved in skill acquisition. It wasn't really until kind of 2010. So that started really to give me some greater grounding in terms of my biomechanics, in terms of particularly the motor learning, motor control. It started to give me kind of higher order understanding of that. And then through my kind of skill acquisition interactions, I was actually skill acquisition technical lead for EIS. So I had the pleasure of working with external consultants like yourself, Rob, Mark Williams, Mark Upton, Rick Shuttleworth, etc. And now currently I'm working for British Swimming, so I'm head of analysis. So I look after all the race analysis, biomechanics support and skill acquisition support that we do for our athletes. And I've been there full time for the last 12 months.
Cool. You have a good mix of academic and applied and research and coaching. So then what we wanted to get together today is to talk about this new organization you three have formed, the Movement and Skill Acquisition Ireland. Can you tell us a little bit about where the idea for this came from and what are your goals for it?
Yeah, I can jump in there. I suppose, like anything, coming back to Ireland from the UK, where the ESAN, the Expertise and Skill Acquisition Network, was set up, I often found myself at some of those events where there weren't too many people from Ireland coming over to an event that I would have thought very highly of, let's say. So when I came back to Ireland, I was keen to look at that space. And it wasn't long being back here when I think Ollie got in touch one day and we were kind of just chatting about things. And we said it'd be great to have a look at something like this, really. I suppose, like anything else, kind of different jobs and things kind of get in the way and different things. But it really took off really in 2017 when we finally were saying, well, actually, we're both going to be in Finland for Keith David's conference with the Finland Sport Institute in Kisakallio that motor skill acquisition event in November. I said, so look, we were both going to be there. So I said, we were like, okay, let's really find some time when we're up there to really look at the potential of putting on an event in Ireland to expose as many coaches to skill acquisition and movement and methods of working in that space. And as soon as we kind of came back, we said, look, it definitely is something, especially because that event was so strong. It was an exceptionally run event. And I think everyone who was there was really impressed with the balance and the delivery of the event. And like anything else, if you're going to do an event like this, for me in Ireland, as I said to Ollie one day, I said, look, I think we need to call Phil Carney, because again, there aren't too many of us who are very strongly associated with skill acquisition. So Phil would always have been somebody, again, that, you know, if you're ever to do something like this, it would have been important to get involved, you know. And that was it. We called Phil, and very quickly we said, okay, let's see about doing this over a couple of Skypes and the like. And it's probably important to mention one of my postgrads, Alan Dunton. He's probably the fourth musketeer in this, but because he's still a student, we're very careful not to overload him too much with stuff. So he's strong in the background, but again, he's got his PhD to finish. So we're trying to manage his load, as they say, with good objective and subjective monitoring going on at the moment. But yeah, so no, that's kind of where it came from, I think.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, probably Ed's covered where the seed of the ideas come from, and I think it was very much stimulated by what we saw in Kisakallio in Finland at that conference. For me in particular, I'm probably very much driven by my applied practitioner and wanting to really drive this information with coaches across all kind of levels of the pathway, be it from performance or all the way down to kind of participation. I work across applied sport, but then I also do my own coaching with kids at home, and I do see a lot of things that could be improved in terms of coaching sessions, etc. And I think through Movement Skill Acquisition Ireland, we can provide people with information. We can help people modify their practice, change their behaviors, and actually find better and more effective ways of doing things. Because especially when we're even involved in participation, it's a battle now. You know, we're battling against iPads and video technology. So actually, the more enjoyable, the more specific we can make coaching sessions, and actually the more opportunities we have to engage kids in that. And then as well, from a performance perspective, about making it more representative, about making it learning faster. So I think the more we can open a coach's eyes up to this, and practitioners and everybody who works in sport, the better, really. And I think now in Ireland, I think we have an opportunity of a bit of a critical mass being created, and the opportunity is really there to kind of spread the word. So
yeah, I'll echo that in terms of what Ollie's saying, just seeing the potential that skill acquisition has across the range of different domains. So working with a range of students over the years and seeing, just getting really excited about how they take the ideas and run with them. And many of those students are coaches, and then meeting the coaches that they're interacting with, and again, seeing the difference that skill acquisition can make. And I think that's a really exciting thing for me to come back at the start of this new organization, which is going to bring coaches, bring academics together, very much in the ESAN mold. I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think I've said it. I really miss ESAN since I left the UK. I think it was a great model, so we definitely need more of that. And I know the big thing you're kind of kicking off with, right, is this upcoming event you have in April titled Constraints-Based Coaching and Ecological Dynamics to Enhance Sports Performance. So can you tell us a little bit, someone that's thinking about attending, can you tell us a little bit about what's going to be on offer there?
Yeah, I suppose the one thing that we're offering is an opportunity for coaches to come and athletes, and to really feel like they can walk away from the conference with easy, applicable work-ons the very next day they're out coaching. So that's why we were really careful when we sat down and put together our wish list about who the people we wanted to come and impact on that as a first event. People that we really felt are really good at communicating that sometimes can be complex ideas, and even sometimes can have kind of scary terms associated to them, but are brilliant at actually getting that point across for someone to be able to say, I can try that on Saturday, or I can try that on Monday night, or I can Do you know that kind of way? So that was a key thing. So when you look at the list, you've got, Keith Davids, who he'll constantly tell you he's just a theoretician in all this, but he's not. His way of making it accessible to everybody about these areas is exceptional. And to have him come and talk around, individual sports, let's say, because I think sometimes in constraints-led coach approaches and ecological dynamics, we often think just of team sports, whereas, of course, this can impact on all sports, let's say, And then we have, the people like, as already mentioned, Rick Shuttleworth, who'll be going through all of the work he does, which, again, ideally, he's worked across sports, not just team sports, but individual sports. And I think when we go down through the list between him and Mark O'Sullivan in your soccer space, and Nick Winkleman around the actual more movement space, into Zoe Wimshurst around the sports vision space, the feel that we wanted to get across was that even if it's not specifically to your sport, we've got people who can speak to your sport. And that's a really important thing, because I think we've all had experience of going to or presenting at conferences when there's a lot of nodding heads in the audience and there's a lot of note taking, and then you meet them 2 or 3 months later and they haven't actually been able to try the things that were discussed in the conference. This has to, for us to feel that we're having any impact on the space at all, we would love people to go away and say, this is actually giving me a platform to change my behavior and made me comfortable to try something and not worry about failing, because the people that they had over those 2 days are all about trying things and are all about learning from failing.
Yeah, again, very much echo what Ed has said. I think we would like people to come to the conference with an open mind, to kind of experience a different way in which they may coach or see movement or understand movement. I think, we've spoken with Ed and Phil is around those opportunities. It's not just in those sessions that we want to have a kind of mix of practicals, but then those informal kind of breakout sessions where people can maybe feel a bit more comfortable to have those context specific discussions. I think, we've all experienced conferences where actually some of those informal conversations are really powerful. So we want to really ensure we get a good mix right, but then, like I say, allow people to relate some of the stuff which the key speakers are talking about back to their own context, so that they can feel comfortable in trying some of that stuff back again in kind of their own environments. And then just creating opportunities for people to network so they can reach out again post-event, when they're trying stuff out and they're figuring stuff out in their own landscape, that they can actually reach out to, any one of the 3 of us or any of the speakers who were there, for them to continually move on this. Because I know that people will walk away from that and see that, actually, there's some really beneficial learning for me here, but actually I'll need support on that as well. So it's about creating that network as well as just a one-off event in April.
And the one thing I'll add to that is that, that doesn't have to wait until the conference to actually start getting involved. So a part of it that we're trying to push is there's a poster element as well, where we want as many people, and this is not just academics or scientists, this is coaches, this is coach development officers, anybody who is trying something, who's doing something that they think is clever and creative in terms of the use of constraints, bring it along, shape the discussion. So have that there, that we can integrate in, you can get some feedback on, you can use it to start a conversation or to stimulate that conversation further. So let's see what you're doing, because I am sure there is an awful lot of really good practice out there, and it's about people bringing that practice to the conference, to the discussion groups as well.
I think even to kind of round out that element of what the conference is about, we've got some very big rocks that we want to make sure are in place. And the one big rock is the quality of the speaker, who are comfortable both in obviously presenting the work, but also applying it and being really comfortable to be challenged in that space. And I think we've done that. There's going to be nobody presenting who will not be open to having challenging questions put at them to help those coaches figure it out in their own space. That's the first thing. The second big rock will be that, shape the discussion idea of posters and other elements that come into it, let's say with breakout groups, to really be able to drill down into detail. But then the other significant big rock is the opportunity on the Saturday for us to link in with Sean Mishka in his event in the States, where you yourself, Rob, are presenting. When we realized there was an opportunity, but there's another similar headspace and mind space going on in the States at the same time, with, again, similar people thinking we want to normalize the idea of constraints-led approach to coaching and ecological dynamics. That's a big rock for us to be able to actually set up quick web Q&A from here in Cork to you guys in Minnesota, and actually just share the discussion with you, for the speakers that you guys have and the speakers that we have, for us to just make that room feel a little bigger for that hour and a bit, let's say, to almost, again, further normalize the idea, to realize, the struggles we're having here, or even the big wins we're having here, are the same struggles and same wins that you're experiencing on the other side of the pond, let's say, and I think that will help people also to realize there's a community of practice here. We're actually, to use Ollie's phrase, there's a critical mass coming around this space now. And I think it's really important that we jump all over it, to be perfectly honest, so that it doesn't die away, and that we're strong on keeping the momentum that, number one, is already building up around our event and Sean's event, but also to use it as a launch pad for continued interaction around this space.
Yeah, and I'm really excited about that video connection too at the two for one conference. That's a great a bonus for people. I can tell from the download numbers I get in my podcast that there are so many people interested in this topic, this approach, and it appeals to a lot of people. But I think there's a lot of people that don't know quite what it means and exactly what to do with it. And I think my worry is people are going to run off and haphazardly try things and say it doesn't work, and then give up on it. So what about the timing of this area? I think it's a ripe time to try to help connect people and give some ideas. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I think Rob, your podcast series was really excellent in underlying some of the theory behind it. And I do agree with you in that I'd seen, certainly in the past 18 months for 2 years, a growing utilization of it kind of within my environments, without people necessarily understanding the theoretical background behind it. So that's probably part of the topics of the conference and the speakers, is that actually we introduce it in a way where there's firm theoretical grounding in it, but we make it accessible to people as well. And I know that that's a difficult task. I mean, when I first started understanding it and I was trying it out with the kids when I was coaching, it's difficult, but it's a part of that kind of trial and error learning that we really have to people to try and understand it. And then, there are practical sessions, and then, there's an opportunity in the conference for people to have those specific context specific discussions. I think that's really important, so that people can kind of come up with their ideas and kind of cross-reference them against people who are maybe a little bit more experienced in using the constraints-led approach.
And I think there's a real advantage in, again, focusing in the conference at the framework. So again, allowing people or giving people a chance to confirm their understanding of the underpinning theory or framework, because the better you have that, the more adaptable, the more different domains you can apply this into, the more different groups that you're working with, you can effectively apply this. So it's not just an example that you can take and apply in one setting, but you understand the framework that you can take off and apply in lots of different situations.
That's just struck a chord with me myself, because I know when I started out coaching, I coached the way I was coached. So that was behind my coaching, let's say. I knew no other way, let's say. And it's only over the last kind of 10, 15 years when I started being exposed to this way of coaching that I beginning to figure it out and try things. But again, as you said, Rob, what happens to those people who just try it and are just, I'm going to throw a constraint at something here. Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, well, it doesn't work, and this constraints thing is crazy, sure. Or is it just a case of throwing different rules at things for the sake of it? I think that the one big thing that I've learned over the years is that the ecological dynamics that we see unfolding in front of us as coaches, our job, or certainly the job I feel that I'm being drawn more to, is that space of knowing when to dip in and knowing when to stay out and stay far out of it, let's say, and to actually, if our event enabled coaches to have that appreciation of, it actually isn't about having to coach constantly through it. It's actually about setting something up that maybe you've identified. This is an area that we need work on. Can I think of a constraint that is going to help, if they're engaged in this constraint, out of that is going to emerge a really helpful behavior to help them problem solve in this space and make better decisions in this space. But while they're doing that, I need to let them explore in that space. Because all too often when I see people, and let's say if I'm working with coaches around helping them to understand the constraints-based approach and so on and so forth, there is this tendency to stay involved, to direct the play, to tell them what to do and when to do it and where to put the ball and so on and so forth, as opposed to, if your constraint is good enough and strong enough and appropriate enough to what you were trying to do, well, then that should be a significant driver for them all to be in that space, very engaged, trying to figure out how to essentially make it work.
And the other thing, of course, is that it can often be very difficult when you go to apply constraints first. And I know full well that, you try things and some of them work and some of them don't work. And you've got to get very comfortable with trying things and monitoring it and being prepared to fail as you try things. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, that's a big part of the meeting, actually. So, that the people who are there, it's about, we've all been through this. We've all tried it. We've all found it difficult. We've all failed lots of times in terms of how we're trying these things. But here you are in a community of individuals who are all doing similarly. And hopefully they will get confidence from that. And we will have follow-up from the conference as well. So you will be part of a group that is continually working and continually helping each other to apply this approach to coaching.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good. And yeah, I agree. It's such a growing area, and it's, by definition, it's something you have to play around with and problem solve from a coach's side too. So I think that would be really good. And, the other thing I wanted to talk in terms of the constraints approach is, I think all three of us are fairly active on Twitter, and you see there's some resistance to this approach and kind of backlash almost. And so I wonder, what about someone that's kind of skeptical about this?
Please come along.
That's what I figured your answer would be.
Yeah. Because it makes us better.
You're welcome.
I think it makes us better in the end. I think these are very important discussions to have. I think a lot of the time, the discussions happen and you start people finding common ground, or they might be calling different things different names, but it's the same concept, or they'll find they have more common ground than they realize. But I think it's really important for people to come along and challenge, for people to come along and give alternatives. It's a really important part of the conference for people to feel open to do that as well. That this is, we're very definitely, very deliberately trying to establish a very open, very supportive discussion at this meeting.
I think on that as well, and you've made a very good point, about, that idea of coaches who would, have a bit of pushback. That's critical. As I said at the start, over the last couple of years, I'm doing more and more in golf, where if you were to ask someone about what are the underpinning tenets of golf coaching, you'd probably have a lot of people talk about the technical aspects of golf, let's say, and yet I'm not a technical golf coach in the way that you'd have your very qualified and very well positioned swing coaches and the like, let's say, but very fortunately, any coaches that I've engaged in around the golf space, they're very open to it. And of course, you're going to have some who aren't, but I think coaches by their nature are quite curious, I think, and I think, it's not that everyone should be all on the same page, not at all. But even in a sport as technical as some people would see it as golf, I've been really pleased with some of the interaction from, people who previously may have been seen as only technical coaches, for their openness to discuss and challenge, very rightly so, but also for their ability to actually see its merits and see how it can fit into their sport. Because at the end of the day, even as Bernstein would have illustrated himself, there is no two shots the same. So if we're trying to control for so much within the human system, well, then we're losing out the opportunity for an individual and an athlete to be free to actually play what's in front of them. And I think even in a sport as technical as golf, I've found there to be a great openness to discuss a space like constraints-led coaching, which technically, excuse the pun, should be in contravention to that, let's say. But I've been quite fortunate to hear some very open ideas around trying to apply it, and there are some excellent practitioners already in the space as well, which is good. I think, as someone said earlier, I think the timing of this right now is very good, because I think we probably have enough people on both sides of the argument to make a good debate out of this. And I think that's really important. We have to be open to having a strong debate to see, well, does our side of the debate hold up? And if it doesn't, well, then we need to also take that in the chin. But I'd be pretty confident that it does.
Yeah, like the other two guys, I think everybody's welcome. We're welcoming the debate and the discussion that comes out from it. I think for me, it would be, for people attending, is the provoking of thought from the discussions. So is what you're doing currently, is it representative of the performance landscape in which your players are, in which the people that you work with are, have the people who are there, they have a strong academic and research background, and we also have a mix of practitioners. I think there's a great saying, I don't know who it's attributed to, but experience is learning from your own mistakes and wisdom is learning from other people's. Well, there's going to be a ton of wisdom there in terms of mistakes to learn from. So I'd say people will be open-minded. They might get different viewpoints, different information on approaches, pedagogy. And, I think we welcome any discussion and debate on it and make it context specific.
And well, actually just picking up on the context specific bit as well, because we will be working very hard to make it context specific for individuals. But I think there's going to be a multi-sport, a mix of different sports coming along and represented at this. And I think that's a fantastic learning opportunity as well. So looking at what other sports are doing, and that, as Ali said, getting people thinking about their coaching and what they're doing and why they're doing it, and comparing that to the reasoning from other sports, I think that's going to be very exciting.
I think even on that as well, and when I think of where the places I'm most challenged in my coaching at the moment, and it's probably when I'm, if I'm back in Cork at the weekend, it's out coaching with the under sixes and the under nines where my two boys play. And there's going to be, it's incredible that the coaching, the environment that you coach in can be challenging no matter what space you're in. And it's sometimes, and especially some of the people who we're going to have at this event, they're coaching right at that space where it's kids, and all we are fed by, these programs from companies about mastery time before training sessions and line them up here. And it's about control. It's about order. It's about this linear approach to, well, if they do this, they're going to succeed in this area. There's no more challenging a space for constraints-led approach to coaching than in the kids space. And that's where even more so is there a need for this conversation to be taken, because all too often we have our, maybe for want of a better phrase, talented kids emerging out of clubs in their sports and going into a national program where the national coach is saying, well, they don't have the fundamentals. They have no game appreciation. They have poor decision making. They're very one-sided in their skill set and so on and so forth, because that's not been done at the childhood level. And it's all great when each of the three of us work at the elite sport level. But as you heard Ali there saying earlier, he's back coaching the kids at the weekend as well. And that's the challenge, to get something as important as this back to those coaches. And those coaches very often are volunteer mum and dads who are there because they really want to be there, but what they're being fed is a real linear system. And it's about filling the time of the training session. It's about ticking a box to get through the first quarter of the session. And all of a sudden we're at halfway. Great. We're over halfway. I can nearly go home now because this is really stressful, because I'm not a coach and I'm not. And this approach that we're talking about, that we've all experienced, having come from where we'd have come from as kids ourselves and how we were coached, into where we are now and how we coach ourselves nowadays. It's really important to let those mums and dads and coaches who are advising those mums and dads in these clubs that there's a better way. There's a better way than lining your kids up and telling them what to do. There's a better way than giving them all of the answers and not affording them any opportunity to explore in their session. And that's what we will all be extremely strong over in our event about, encouraging that space to create opportunities in your training, and you're in that space for your athletes to explore, be that in golf, badminton, table tennis, hurling, football, soccer, rugby, basketball. It doesn't matter. whatever your sport, swimming, it doesn't matter. Are there opportunities for your athletes to explore? And at the moment, the vast majority of coaching that I'm seeing out there, there's not enough of this going on.
It's interesting, Ed. I was actually coaching on Saturday, but during the same session, so I was doing some coaching on with kids cycling, and on the infield there's like a football pitch and there's a Gaelic football session. So I was setting up before the session started, and there must have been about 20-30 kids there. They all, as they come in, there's loads of footballs and they start playing, and that kind of warm up unstructured play time, and there's loads of noise. And then as soon as the session started, there were all these cones or all these ladders, and it all became quiet from the kids for like 40 minutes. And there was lots of conversation from the coaches. And then when the session finished, they all kicked the ball around, and then there was loads of noise again. And I was like, interesting.
Yeah. Did lots of learning until the practice started.
Yeah.
Can't believe you mentioned hurdles and ladders in this podcast, Elegy. That's just a no-no. Is there not a disclaimer here?
Yeah. So I have to bite my tongue sometimes at the park. I don't like to give unsolicited advice to people, but sometimes it's hard. Yeah. I guess the last thing I wanted to, second last thing, I wanted to about the impact on research of these kind of meetings. So I think sometimes we tend to think of these meetings as unidirectional, right? You're going to bring a bunch of academics and theoretical people, and they're going to impart their knowledge on coaches. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of value coming back the other direction in terms of guiding our research questions and making us tighten our theories up. So can you give us some thoughts on that kind of angle? If I'm a researcher that's not really interested in coaching myself or a grad student, what can they get out of the kind of meeting like this?
Keith Davids is your absolute classic case of that. Keith Davids even said to me in Finland himself, he said, the amount of research that he's involved in that has been driven by the practice. And that's what excites him. It's change. That impact is changing. The direction that is coming from is now changing from evidence-based practice and practice-based evidence. And when you see a guy like him who's engaged in research groups across the world, it's because there are coaches coming out of the coaching environment and asking better questions and going to academics to say, can you go and look at this for us empirically to determine, well, are we on the right track here?
Yeah, I think, again, likewise, my research for the last 2 years has been focused on the development of youth track and field athletes. And that research was started by a conversation with a parent. And it was fueled by my experiences coaching the local athletics club, my experiences watching other coaches. And it's about the conversations that I've had with those other coaches thinking, you're onto something here. This is fantastic. Let's take the next step. Let's confirm. Let's explore. Let's see how we can develop this further. And so I think it is, again, it's another reason why I think this is going to be a really, really stimulating meeting. It's definitely the potential for seeing what people are doing. And again, that's why we've got people bringing what they're doing to the meeting is such an important part, because it stimulates us as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the mix of academic and practitioner and coaches within that will make the discussion so rich. I think without any of those people there, it would be lacking somewhat. And I think the coaches in particular, because they have so much experiential knowledge, they have so much information which they can add and provide depth and context to the discussions, and saying, hey, I've seen this, or I've seen that, or that makes sense to me, and has specific examples. And I get that kind of every day within my environment. Coaches asking me X, Y, and Z, and what's the theory behind this, and what's the academic research behind this. I think that's really important in order to drive those discussions. And, as you know, Rob, I constantly email you and conversation with Keith Davids around some of the questions that I'm getting on a day-to-day basis. So I think actually for me, coaches will drive a lot of the performance questions and have been recently, and it hasn't been the other way about. And then I think from the academic community, there's a real need to make sure that a lot of the research and the information is applicable and kind of almost digestible for the applied group as well.
Yeah, I think on that as well, I think one thing for someone maybe listening in to think, geez, the three lads are all on the same page and it's like this big nodding dog event where everyone's in agreement with each other. It's incredible. In fact, the conversations I've had with Phil on the road home some night in the car, when we're talking about practice schedule, and we do differ. But one thing if we differ on, it's we differ, and we have a strong argument behind why we differ, and there's a rationale behind why I have my belief and understanding, and equally for Phil, and it is not afraid to actually put it out there and say, well, this is what I think based on what I've read and based on what I've tried, and how that, and equally going the other way. And when I think of that idea of, especially in this space, if you're interested in constraints-led approach and ecological dynamics, well, then you're interested in being challenged, because the whole space is about exploration and challenging. Because I think back to the Finland conference in Helsinki in November, and Ollie, you'll back this up, I'm sure. We were up all night. People were up all night, all day. It was 3 or 4 days of people just chatting, and it was so open, and so people were so comfortable being challenged around their ideas. And I have one particular example on that. Martin Niehoff in Amsterdam, the baseball guy, the baseball coach, and his colleagues there, Gonny Varley and Paul Venner. We had a conversation with them that went on about 3 hours one night, and it was all around what their experiences are. And equally, he was so open to throw things into the pot and say, well, this is what we try. What do you think of this? And we'd say, geez, I wouldn't have thought that would have worked, and this, that, and all right, well, this, totally open just to put things out there, throw it into the mix. And as Stu McMillan says, get some skin in the game,
Mm-hmm.
Put something in there that you feel, you know what, I'm going to throw something into the mix here. And part of it is just to see how it gets thrown around and blended in with the other ideas, And yes, at the moment and where we're at, because of our experiences, we're probably in a lot of agreement with a lot of our things. But when we're not, when we disagree, it's done with the space of actually, okay, well, I'm going to challenge that with evidence, not just because it's easy just to spot something and to knock it down. And I think that's something that people will get at our event. That's something that when you ask Rick Shuttleworth a question, he will not give you a stock answer. He will take it to, where are you experiencing this? Okay, well, I've seen this, and so on and so forth. And then these are my experiences. But I'd be astonished if you'll have anyone at the event giving you definites, giving you, well, if you do this, this will work. No, if you do this, what you might find is this, and it'll be very interesting. This could take you down this way. Because, well, that's the way it should all be, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I see in other spaces of coaching where they're a lot stronger and a lot more forceful and a lot more cause and effect about their coaching, because it's about controlling their space.
Mm-hmm.
We're not about control here. In fact, if anything, we're about enabling people to be comfortable in out of control space, in that chaos, especially where we are in this neck of the woods right now, Rob, with the Six Nations going on. You can see players and teams who are very much playing what's in front of them and very much playing to a script. It's so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And those who are playing what's in front of them are a tricky team to play against, because everyone is very much in the moment and experiencing what's needed to perceive, and going to act on what they perceive.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. And I've seen a lot of frustration with coaches having with academics, with either being one extreme, either definitive about everything or wishy-washy about everything. So I think it's good, when you have kind of a balance, I think this might work, or try this. So I think that's a good approach. And
actually, on that, I had a chat, and it was one of those kind of childhood moments when I had a chat with Carl Newell over lunch when we were in Finland. And to hear this guy, like, it's his model that we're all kind of going back to, that 1986 model around, the task, the constraints, and the organism, and to hear how open he is to how any of this is taken on. He is, I'd be really interested to see how it would work in that space. I have no idea how it would work in this space. It'd be great to see how, you know what I mean? He's put something out there. He didn't expect it to be taken up in the way it has. And even still, 30 years later, he's like, well, it'd be great to see where it can go, because Well, I don't know. No one knows. But let's keep asking the questions and let's keep challenging the model.
The last question I have for you guys is, without putting the cart too far ahead of the horse, kind of, what are some of your future plans and goals for Movement and Skill Acquisition Ireland?
If I start off on that one, I think from a conference perspective, we would plan to have one yearly, probably move it around the island. So we're in Cork, and you know, big thanks to Cork Institute Technology for hosting us this year. But potentially either again keep in Cork or move around the island of Ireland depending on need. I think a big thing for me is creating a network of connected people who either myself, Ed, or Phil can contact, or you know, wider within the network, again, the people who are coming to speak. And it's really a kind of you could, like I say, a community of people who can learn and problem solve and, you know, progress together. And what was a real big thing for me, hopefully coming from the conference, is that people go there, they feel they can understand the information, they come away from that going, oh, I've learned something, and they feel empowered and confident enough to walk away that they can try it within their own environments. And if there's any struggle there around that, then they actually know people that they can go and talk to, whether over the phone or Skype or in person. And hopefully we can kind of grow numbers over the coming years within that. And I think that's hugely possible with the world of social media and all the technology we have now. So,
yeah, again, I'll echo that. But it's just being part of that network, growing that network. I think we'll be figuring out how that's going to work as we go along. And part of the conference will be how do people want to contribute to this network going forward. That is, I think, our key outcome of what we managed to get started with this first meeting.
I also think when you consider the goodwill that we have experienced since we floated this idea out to the people we approached, would tell you that there is a real interest in this space, in people who are interested in this space to help others. I've been so impressed and just blown away by the goodwill that we've had from our speakers who are giving up their time to come to Cork to basically share all of, as Ali said earlier, their wisdom and their experiences, but also the ways that it has challenged them and it hasn't worked out. And I think if there's one thing for sure, something like this, an annual event that people can think, I didn't get to it this year, but I'm gonna push to get to it next year. And you know what? I'm gonna try and get involved even before I get there. And that's what, you know, social media has given us already. The engagement already before the event has started has been incredible. It's been incredible already. Like we've people, again, we were hoping to kind of alert people in Ireland to this space. And yet we've tickets sold from Finland. We've tickets sold all over the UK. And it's great to see that people are prepared to travel, even, you know, people are prepared to travel to have these conversations. And I think if there's one thing we can say from that is to say, you know, I don't think this movement is going away. And I hope it doesn't, but I think it's something that's actually here to stay. And I think the more people we can get engaged in it, and the sooner we can, well, then our athletes that we work with and the coaches that we work with are ultimately going to be in a better place a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So yeah, I suppose going forward, it's about trying to get more and more people having these kind of conversations. And it's credit to yourself and Rob and others like you who are prepared to just, you know, like this, help us promote the idea.
Oh yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I think it's going to be a great event. So April 6th and 7th, right? And the registration's already going on. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So definitely it's a can't miss event if you can get there.
I'd also say, Rob, that I think people are genuinely excited about the social activities that may take place in Cork and Ireland as well. So I think, as well as what's going on at the conference, we may have some people who are coming over just for social as well. So, but hey, that's all good. Yes.
That was a memorable part of ESAN as well. So you'll carry on the tradition. So
exactly.
So thanks for taking some time to talk with me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Cheers, Rob. Thank you very much.
Thanks again for the great discussion, guys. Really excited to remotely connect with you on April 6th. In the show notes, you can find a link to register for the Movement and Skill Acquisition Ireland Conference, along with the Twitter handles for the organization and my 3 guests today. Remember, you can contact me at robgray@asu.edu or on Twitter at ShakyWeights. To find out more about the podcast, please check out perceptionaction.com. Finally, to support the podcast and receive bonus materials, including an extra monthly episode, please head over to patreon.com/perceptionaction. This is Rob Gray from ASU. Cheers for now, and keep 'em coupled.
I'd have drunk myself sick.